go. Let's do that. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Worship Guitar Show. This is going to be an interesting episode, especially since that's the wrong overlay. Let's try that right there instead. There we go. No surprise that tonight's show met with just a little bit of resistance. It's going to be an interesting little endeavor. That's not the overlay I'm looking for, so I guess we're just going to... There we go, right there. No, why are you labeling the wrong one? You know, we're just going to ignore that. Hey, so ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's show. Thanks so much for joining us. We are live on Facebook and on YouTube by all accounts of everything I can see. So what we're going to do is kind of launch into this very interesting show. Why is that saying that we're not online there? Huh. Hang on a second. This is going to invariably make some noise saying that we're not online there. But we're working. Hello, everybody. Okay, that's good. Hang on a second. There are some. This is going to invariably make some noise. Things happening here. There. Boy, when I said this was going to meet with a little bit of resistance. Hello, everybody. I didn't necessarily anticipate that it was going to be that quick and that fast. Make some noise. Things happening here. There. Boy, when I said this was going to meet with a little bit of resistance. Hello. There we go. All right. So here's the thing. Tonight's show is going to be an interesting endeavor because we're talking about two things that I think all of us at some point or another have struggled with, and that is walking out our faith in the midst of walking out forgiveness. At the center of our faith is Jesus, but kind of wrapped around in the walk of what Jesus was about and what he wants for us is they know not what they do. Sometimes, people are just blinded by a range of things. And on a day like today, where I think everybody in the world is kind of watching what a lack of forgiveness and a lack of compassion and a lack of understanding for one another, what it looks like when played out on the national and international stage. We can see that if we're really honest, regardless of where we sit in the midst of all of that stuff, that the devil has got a masterful play going. Really just kind of dealing out the cards, and people are just sucking it up. And the devil deals in the spirit of division. And part of what divides us is a lack of unity. And lack of unity, one of the greatest divisive factors that the enemy has in there, my favorite words is quiver, right? They just shoot those poison arrows right through the heart. Is this whole forgiveness or lack thereof. And it is a forbidden fruit of sorts, and it's one that is so tempting because it leads us down a path of separation for a bunch of things. And so this is one of those shows that, hey, Brad, what's going on? Great to see you, my friend. Is, I think, really important because it's interesting. A few months back, somebody said, you guys never talk about quote unquote real stuff or whatever, or something like that. And my comment was, well, this is the Worship Guitar Show. They're like, all you guys are doing is talking about guitar. I'm like, that's kind of the focus of this guitar. But I did not forget about the heart of what they did a rather condemnatory job of trying to express, which is, let's make sure that we don't miss the ministry side of this. And one of the things that my big takeaway from last week is that this is a community group for guitar players. So it's official now. I have decided we are a worship guitar player community. And this is a community group. And so with that kind of official kind of like, hey, that's what we're going to step into, I was like, well, how do we actually really choose to get real about this thing? And that means that we begin to talk about some of these topics that are just a little awkward to talk about. So first of all, hello to everybody that's there. Part of what we're going to do in the midst of this show is that we are going to, have an opportunity to talk about some of the stuff that's personal for us. Because a community group is a place where people can kind of be part of a community and feel known in a community. I know that sounds really strange for some sort of online YouTube thing and Facebook thing, but guess what? That's how many of our churches are meeting as community groups. So I'm like, well, so what? Why can't we? And why shouldn't we? And I unanimously, as a vote of one, said, I see no reason. And so until I feel so moved, we're going to be a community group that meets every week. Hey, what's going on, Forrest? Great to see you, my man. Thank you, Forrest. I appreciate that. Lonnie, thank you. Joe Reggio, hello, my dear friend. What a pleasure to see you guys here. Thank you so much. And Forrest, hang on. Let's see if I can pull that puppy in. No, my restreaming application is behaving very strangely tonight. So, but again, why should I not believe that on a topic like this, on a connection like this? Gil, what's going on? Thank you so much for saying hi. That the enemy wouldn't be like, yeah, they're showing up, because at the point that two or more gathered, and we kind of try and braid the strands of this fraying rope together, the enemy's going to want to divide. So I'm not going to spiritualize it. I'm not that kind of guy, but my spiritualism is deep in the sense that I know when the devil's sniffing around, kind of going, I don't like the smell of this at all. So first of all, I'm going to be uniquely, there we go, Jem. First of all, again, Brad, great to see you. Jem, what a pleasure, my dear friend. I have missed you, and I think of you pretty much daily, and I seem to be peaking a little bit, so I'll pull back the input there. All right, so I'm gonna unpack a little. This is one of my favorite things, and I think I mentioned to this group a couple of times that one of my favorite things. Jem, by the way, Jem has recently stepped into this leadership role where he's leading a group of young adults. It's his first quote unquote church quote unquote gig, stepping up to the plate every week, leading a team of young adults. Across the Jordan, one of my favorite crossings. Seemed to cross that a number of times. So I'm going to be, without mentioning, let's say, how do they say it in TV? The names have been changed to protect the whatever. So part of this concept of being real means coming at an expense of being revelatory. That is to say, the revealing sense of. I don't know why I feel the overwhelming desire to just hide behind the guitar a little bit, but I do, which is really interesting. But also just kind of sharing a bit about my background and a very painful part of the road that led me to working with Bruce and kind of how this all worked. I'm going to tell that story in reverse because I think the happy ending is something. Wait a second. I'm going to come back to that in just a second, Jem. But that's aligned with what I'm talking about. Sometimes, we don't see the happy ending, and sometimes, the shotgun blast to the heart can really throw us for a loop. And I'm not talking about something that I haven't experienced. But God always has something better for us. We sometimes just can't see that, right? And I have a student. I love this guy, brilliant guitar player, and he had this bad experience at a church and said, yeah, I was at the church, I was playing on the team, and then just some stuff went down, and he was just like, I'm out of here. And, the reality was his faith wasn't super deep. I get that. But the whole thing is sometimes the people-born stuff chase people out the front door who we really want to be going to any lengths that we can just kind of go, wait. So it's part of how it works. I understand that, but it's part of what makes this process so mind and emotion numbing sometimes. So I really want to speak to that. Jem, with that said, the end result is really sometimes, as we're kind of down through that Annie Lennox song, crawling through, walking on broken glass. It's just like, there it is. When you're in that season down in the valley and you're just kind of going, man, all I see is the bloodshed. And it's basically pretty much only my own blood. That's hard to see, And so, Jem, I have a virtual high five on your praise report. It's been 365 days since launching his website. And wow. 15, let me make sure I got the right number of zeros. 1,500th order. Glory to God. And this is the thing on a day like today when we're going to kind of dig deep. We also really, really, really want to stay focused on let's offer up the praise. where praise is seeing us through. For those of you who don't know, Jim is a brilliant musician, but he is also he's in that land in between where he spent a lot of time in the States touring and playing in Nashville. And the Lord has called him back to be in Australia. And there are certain church movements in Australia, and God is very actively aware there. But it's a very different set of opportunities. And walking that out after having been in the epicenter of, the Christian music business, and then being back home, living, dare I say, at the risk of revealing, living with the rents, it's just like, man, it's just kind of like, it's a thing, and his parents are beautiful, and Jem's a result of that. But it's still kind of like, man, God, how long, right? So I feel you on that. And yes, congrats. All right. So playing my version of that in reverse, and I'm going to do my best. Hey, Bruce, great to see you, my friend. Perfect timing for me to see that coming through. So my version of that is that I was involved with a church. It went bad. And right around that time, I ended up sitting in a barber's chair in San Francisco. I'm like 50 years old, and I'm shaking my head, and I'm going, because it's all ended. It's come crashing down. It just, we'll get to the bad part in a minute, because I want to walk through that, because some of you have been through something similar. But I'm sitting there, I'm going, I'm 50 some odd years old. What am I going to do? Like in the Bay Area, at my age, you're not going to get a job in .com world. I have some skills as a videographer, but they were not nearly as developed as they are now. And I was just going, I don't know what I'm going to do. The phone rings, and it's Bruce Adolph. He's like, hey, would you like to come maybe do some digital stuff with me? I don't know, maybe around video or something with a magazine. I don't know. And it was just one of those moments that heaven opened up. God brought his arm down and said, come on, let me pull you up out of that valley. I got other plans for you. And it wasn't anything I could have orchestrated. It wasn't anything that I could have thought. It was a God thing. And it has been a blessing over and over and over and over and over and over again. And so the journey that I had to go through to get there, I couldn't have gone through any other way. So that gets us back to the short version of the crawling and walking through broken glass. Was at a church. It was a church that I had come back to that was actually the church that I got saved at. I was the worship and creative arts director. My wife was also on staff. Some new folks came. There may or may not have been some sort of implicit direction from one of the other senior leaders that they may or may not have been stepping into some sort of leadership role. That much I don't know, but I do know. Thanks, my friend. Appreciate it. Thank you. Justin, hey. Hey, thank you, man. And so, but they basically kind of came in, the new folks came in kind of wanting to do my job. And they got what they wanted, and kind of at the end of a not good back and forth, before all of this really kind of went south, I went to the guy that was the worship creative arts director before me, and I said, look, this is what's kind of happening here. Is this worth fighting for? He said, absolutely. So one of the first things that I did when I saw things starting to get a little slippery, I sought counsel. I sought counsel from somebody who knew the shoes that I was walking in, and I trusted. And his advice was great. Ultimately, I think God was in the background just kind of going, you're not going to leave this situation unless I make it so unpleasant that you have to go. And in that sense, I can see God's hand on it, but it was a very painful process. The pastor ended up just being not cool. And I turned to him one day and I said, hey, I'd had a bad experience that kind of looked and smelled like this, and like, this is a not comfortable place for me to be. And he said kind of something the equivalent of, I've got your back, and then he didn't. So the church that you get saved at is a special place. And so basically, my wife and I, me in particular, got forced out by the new folks. Doesn't look good on paper. And if I were to be honest, I spent a little bit of time and I was like, I usually am, if not outright prayerful, because I'm not always, if I'm going to fess up, I'm always very mindful of finding some topic that we're going to cover that I believe is going to bring you value, because these live streams aren't about me, they're about you. This is a community group official now. And so the idea is that, this whole kind of faith and forgiveness, they are just tethered together. And so, the thing about it is that I happen to, I'm like, okay, well, let's do a kryptonite moment. Let me, for the sake of everybody watching this, let me go back over to the church website, which I'm not going to reveal. I'm not going to reveal the name or anything. And, they've kind of have a worship album out. I listen to some of the music and I watch some of the people that I knew that are there and some of the people that aren't, which is usually really telling. And just kind of watched how some of the people that had been in leadership, they're still in leadership, have kind of been forced out of the worship picture. And that it's a family that is kind of at the center of it. All the family members are there, but the other leaders aren't. I'm just like, okay, it's a thing. And this family had a history of causing some problems at a previous church, and leadership did not hold sanctly the hours and the days and the weeks that had been poured in the worship team. And you know what? That happens. It's kind of like, I'm working at McDonald's and, I have a bad experience with the manager. Like, it just happens. Obviously McDonald's and church are slightly different things. And I did not get saved at McDonald's. But sometimes people just are busy, distracted, whatever. My part of that, how do I deal with that poison fruit that is very tempting to keep taking a bite of, because the whole kryptonite side is like, all right, well, let me go back and take a look at this and kind of, really identify my true emotions and then kind of go, okay, in being transparent, how do I actually bring that to our community group here and kind of go, my guess is most of us have had some sort of experience like that. And I can say I'm still not over it. But my heart is kind of like, I can't live in a place of unforgiveness, even though I feel unforgiveness. So let me just separate that out. My head is at a point where I'm not going to let the depth of my emotions ultimately keep me from making the decision of not having forgiveness, right? So in my head, I'm like, I'm at a place where I can have forgiveness for these folks. But my emotions are basically like having none of it. And I'm going to have to be okay with that. And I am okay with that. But I just want to clarify. Oh, yeah. But here's the thing. It's like, I think there's forgiveness here. And ultimately, you want this thing to talk to this thing. But if I'm really honest, I'm not, this thing isn't quite there, but this thing is. And I think ultimately, as a believer, we have to get to a point where we've negotiated enough room for the Holy Spirit to get in and get to work. And honestly, sometimes, it's kind of like the decision that we made about choosing to walk the walk, where God's been talking to us, but we finally went, fine, I'm in. Right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but there was a certain amount of resistance about just giving my life over to Jesus. That was just so you guys know, I come from a Jewish background. Like, I stopped getting invited to the Seder. Like, basically, the small part of my family that's on the West Coast, they didn't disinherit me, but I got stopped getting invited to all family gatherings. Just like, which weren't very many, which was basically the Seder. And what happened is, I love Melissa. She's the Bible ninja, if such a thing exists. But we're there at the Seder, and, the question comes up, what makes this night different from all others? And Melissa was like, well, and blah, blah, blah. And she's citing Bible verses, and then my cousin, my dad's first cousin, says, well, Melissa, the Jews, we don't really believe in God. It's more of a, tradition sort of thing. And the thing is that I remember my buddy Atma once said, Christianity in some ways was grafted on, if you will, to the tree of the Old Testament, right? And so we kind of became one tribe, those that chose to kind of follow, but it was very clear. It was never got invited again, and really pretty much never heard from that wing of the family ever again. It was really kind of a very weird thing. So, but at the same time, I was just I was invited into this family. And we're not perfect, but we're pretty darn awesome because most of the time we treat each other with grace and forgiveness. More importantly, one of our core family values is two of our core family values are grace and forgiveness, right? Faith and grace and forgiveness, it's all intertwined, right? Because we want to have faith that people are going to do the right thing. And when they don't, we have to extend grace even when our hearts are not feeling forgiveness, right? And it's part of what makes this thing so special. It's okay, I'm not feeling it here yet, but I am here. So I just got to walk it out. So let me just poke in over what's going on, Matthew. Always a pleasure. So here's the thing. So what does all this mean? So my guess is each of us has some experience that's still got those nagging oh my word. I'm going to pull this one in because, the funny thing is, Alan, I'm going to speak to that. Well, first of all, let me read this, first of all. I got saved at the end of trying to save a marriage my ex didn't want. I've been divorced. I know my own version of those feelings for those of you that haven't been married, there is a feeling that part of your life is defined by the person that you're with, because so much of what you do is involved and revolves around that person. And it's just, you become one, right? That's why the Bible is very clear about kind of, you're not supposed to become one with somebody until, that gets confusing. Even 10 years later, I can find myself arguing with the ghost. I'm going to leave that up for a minute because, the funny thing is, Alan, man, I would say hours, if not days, if not weeks that I have spent having conversations and arguments with people in the shower that are not there, but they're there. I've chomped on that bait more times than I care to admit. So, arguing with a ghost, there is, for those of you that have yet to kind of go through something like that, hang on a second. You think. But, the whole thing about, these imaginary conversations, I think conceptually, we've got it half right. And I say this having spent, I dare say I may have somewhere a similar number of shower argues or whoever it is, shadow boxing or whatever the heck it is, having spent a lot of time in that ring and really not being any the wiser for it. But having chomped down on that bait, and the devil loved keeping me in that place, just loved it. And this is one of the things about the lack of choice to forgive, which is you just keep going back. And that whole verse about the dog going back and eating its vomit is one that has permeated because it's such a great visual of that thing. You just go back and you shouldn't, but you just can't resist the bait. There's a book that floats around here called The Bait of Satan. And it's kind of, I'm going to gently weigh in on a topic here, because it's one that we need to talk about, because there's a pastoral element to some of this that makes it very difficult. Hey, Brett, what's going on, man? Nice to see you. That makes it very difficult sometimes to make heads and tails of this, because when we get hurt by a pastor, it brings up a whole range of different types of emotions, obvious ones, right? But, excuse me, the idea of kind of choosing to just kind of go, okay, well, God called me out of this church. He's got something else in mind. I guess I'm just going to have this sense about it. The sad part is, like this student I've got, this guy's just a great guitar player. And I got to meet him at a guitar camp where his other buddy is very involved in church. So we kind of all know, this particular thing. And it's really hard because I can see he only talked about it once, but I can see how hurt he was. And he was like, he didn't say it, but he's basically like, the last thing on earth I'm going to do is go back into a situation where it's just this much of a hypocrisy. The problem is that we're human, and without that revelation, right, about grace, and with that revelation, when we don't really have the sense of kind of like God's grace for all the muck we make, and that part of the conversation really, Brad, or Alan rather, is that we got it half right, but we're having the conversation with the devil instead of with God. And I know you heard that one, because if we're having that conversation with God, it's just like, all right, I really want to be having this conversation with the devil, but let's just imagine for a moment I'm not going to have the beta side. We'll come back to the pastor side of it in just a moment. All right, God, I really want to take this bait, but I'm struggling with forgiveness around this. I'm struggling with it here because I don't want to forgive whatever, fill in the blank. But also in my heart, I don't know how to unchange the feelings that I've got. And maybe part of it is not unfeeling this, but reveal it to me because I need some help on this. Those conversations, unlike the ones with the devil, where the devil's like, I got your leg in my trap and I ain't letting go. God is just like, I want to see you freed from that snare. I want you to learn the things that you need to learn down here in the valley, such that when you get up to the mountaintop again and you look back the next time you descend into the valley, you do not make the same mistakes again. When you see the snare of unforgiveness, you recognize it for what it is. You walk around it instead of right into it. It's not easy. But if we're holding on to this thing here, we're blinded to that thing in front of us. We're just not going to see it coming because we've not learned the spiritual lessons. Because the thing is that I think part of the growth spiritually happens at the point that we actually go, we're going to let go of the stuff that we know is not good for us, and we're going to choose to stay let gone of that, right? Let gone. I got to write that down. I kind of like that, let gone. Because that really speaks to the fact that we're not going to not only let it go, we're going to let it go, and we're going to keep it gone. All right, look, sometimes we kind of can't, we don't catch it, right? And it happens, right? I get that. But the idea is the choice is like once we kind of go back into it, okay, hang on a second. Yeah, no, I'm gonna let me just take a quick moment. Let me check in here. Because I'm seeing some stuff here. Dude. Yep, it's really, and here's the thing is that the devil loves to check in. The devil, God is ever present, and I would like to believe, for better, worse, or in between, the devil is aware of that and just looking for their opportunity. And it just happens like that. Chris, my man. I'll go a step further. It's about extending grace to people that we don't like and don't look and behave like us, right? That is to say, there's the in crowd, because every church has some version of that. Let me rephrase. That's the old Doug. Let me not say every church. Many churches have a version of that, right? There's the in crew, and there are the people that just don't quite fit in with that crew, and somehow they become expendable in some way because they're not part of this in clique sometimes. And I've seen it happen enough that I know it happens. And that's just that's not how Jesus treated people. If anything, Jesus was the opposite. He was like, he didn't want to be around the in people. He wanted to go seek the people that were halfway out the door and just go, wait, I got something for you. I got what you came for, right? And people didn't come to be part of the in clique. They came to actually to seek the revelation that was going to transform their lives and transform the lives of their families and the people that they work. That's what they came for. And when we get in the way of that, there will be a reckoning. Just like all of us, God's going to have us, and he's just going to go, these are things you did good. But we need to have a conversation about this. You were supposed to be a steward of grace and forgiveness. And out the door they went. And you were too busy sipping on your latte and your skinny jeans to actually get up off your duff and run after them. Because Jesus wouldn't have been, first of all, sitting there in his skinny jeans sipping on a latte. Jesus would have been down on his knees praying about that situation, not giving the enemy that opportunity to get his teeth into that, right? Because the thing is that here's the thing, is I understand in ministry we want to embrace the people that we're most like, whether it's the way we look, whether it's the way we smell, whether it's the way we eat, whether it's the way the cars we drive or our zip code. It's part of our natural state in our flesh. But we're not called to live there. We're called to live by a completely different creed. And we need to be faster extending grace and slower at extending judgment, because we do like to judge. Let's face it. But look what the mess that judgment is leading our country in. I'm not getting into like who, what, when, where, how, why, other than say people getting into the judgment ring and getting into the judgment seat instead of the grace seat and the mercy seat and the prayer seat and the unity seat. We are in a country that is chomping at the bit to say, you are you and I am me and you're wrong and I'm right. As opposed to like, hey, if we don't figure this out, the enemy's going to have a giant win on their hands, because the enemy is crushing it right now, just loving it. The hatred, and I mean, let's boil it down. Look at the Bible and just go, what are the signs of the Bible? Disunity, hatred, judgment, all of the stuff that's just like, it just reeks of the devil. The devil's just going, this is awesome. Keep going. Keep going, America. Keep going, world. Loving this, man, Yes, amen. Slow to extend judgment, quick to extend grace. Yep. The sad thing is I'm looking at this worship team that I poured so much time into, and I'm like, all my people, there's not one person that I really spent all that energy pouring my time into that's on that team. I'm like, there it is. I was like, man, and that hurts me because it was a private club. I'm just like, okay. And this is the thing is that, and first of all, then there are the people that actually just kind of go, I'm staying. Like, Jem, one of the things I'm most proud of you about is it would be really easy, because Jem's buddies with Nigel, I can say that. Jem wouldn't, but I will. It would be really easy for Jem to just go over to Hillsong and just hang out there and do all of that. But he's actually taking the higher road. He's actually one of 5 that actually just kind of said, you know what? First of all, Jem's family, I believe, is at this church. And so what Jem is choosing to do is honoring honor as opposed to honoring will. We have free will. We can do whatever we want. But that walk, and Jem, I promise you, God honors it. There's times we need to leave. With God, he was very clear, Doug, you need to go. And fortunately, Bruce has been such a blessing. I mean, for everything that I quote unquote lost in that situation, through Bruce and worship musician in this community, God's repaid that, not tenfold, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times. And, it's just, it's to the level of overflow that far exceeds what I deserve. But at the same time, that's what God wants. He wants way more for us than we deserve. But we gotta, get out. We gotta, what did I say? Let gone, right? And yeah, here's the other thing though. We also have to really be careful. And I can see inside your words. I know you. I know your heart. We can't we can't wear other people's offense, and that is, So if we're going to go down the list of, let's see if I can do this effectively. 5 spiritual fruits that we can't afford to eat. And when I say spiritual, I mean the ones that are going to make us ill. 1, lack of forgiveness will poison you from the inside out and will keep you having imaginary fights and conversations with people for years. Been there. Lack of grace. People are going to make mistakes. But when we're gracious with people, even when they screw up the most, accountability, yes. But when you love on somebody that's really screwed up, they already know they're screwed. Most people, just for the sake of conversation, I need to write this down because I'm not always the best visual learner. Grace and forgiveness. I think I'm talking about the fruits of the Spirit here, by the way. When you love on, most people beat themselves up way worse than we ever need to. Quick aside, but relevant here. There was a period of time when I was first at this church, when I'd started serving in leadership. We would do what we actually called performance reviews for the worship team, because part of the way you get people to step into leading themselves is by having some accountability. Where every quarter we were just like, hey, we're going to meet. We're going to talk about what we see you growing in. We're going to give you 3 things that we would love for you to work on. And we're going to check in and see how you're doing. That's separate from community group and all of that. It's not as textbook and kind of as unemotional it is. It's really just kind of going, we needed a system that enabled us to help the whole team grow, but do so that it was done in faith and love and all of that. Always start and end in prayer. People knew that we were there to help them get along. And every time before we had to go, here are some of the areas that we need to see you working, the person always went, I know I need to work on this. We never even had to say it. They already knew. But we created an atmosphere that was safe enough for them to kind of unpack it. People know already. They don't need to have their... I don't need to go Catholic school on you. You don't have to rap people on the nails, or on the knuckles, right? People most of the time already feel really badly about themselves. Like most people walk around, they got Facebook face, but most people have been so beat up in their lives. The last thing they really need is the church to beat them up. And when they finally went, I think I found it. God it's the forgiveness and the grace and the understanding that I've always sought. They going to go to church and go, oh, I didn't find it there either. They walk out that door and it's there. All right. Understanding it's not a fruit of the Spirit, but I'm adding it to today's thing. I think we have a responsibility in leadership to understand people that we don't intuitively understand. I mean, it's so easy to surround ourselves with like-mindedness. When I first started seeing this couple and their family start to go sideways in a way that they'd already gone sideways in another church and I already knew about, like a wolf mother, I protected my flock. The people that I'd spent all that time pouring into, I'm just kind of like, and by the way, by what I saw today, all of whom are gone, except for one who actually wasn't at the main church that I was at. All gone, every single one of them. So, but at a certain point, they weren't my people, but they were people that I was delegated to lead and felt that responsibility fiercely. And, but at the same time, in that moment, I could have found the way to just kind of go, hey, this is what's happening here. It's not okay. You need to understand it's not okay. We're not going to this isn't going to happen. But I want to understand where you're coming from. Because that probably could, and should have dismantled that whole thing before the enemy got in there. Because at the end of the day, what really happened is the enemy won. Listen, I left, and it was extremely destructive. I was very careful about what I said to the rest of the team when we left. But, I've never, here is the, how do I say this without sounding like an idiot? For all the times that I've been part of a team where I felt that the leaders didn't pour into every possible thing that they could find the energy to do for the team's well-being. Do I go down the list? Sure. And I'm just going to go through the practical and so on and so forth, because this is, again, we want to see the wins, right? What are some of the... Now, you know what? I'm not going to do that right now. Got a little nudge there, so I'm going to obey that. There's always going to be something to kind of be disappointed about. What I tried to do was actually kind of go, what are the things that I've seen broken on other teams that I don't want to see happen on this team? And in so doing, I spent a huge amount of energy pouring into the team and giving in the areas that I saw other leaders hadn't given, not because I was going to be a better leader, but because of the level of caring I had for what the team I felt deserved for the time and energy they put into this. We lead busy lives, right? We want to make sure that the time we invest, and I remember, one conversation in particular with one of the people that I had the privilege of serving in that role. They're talking about how they just felt, that the other leaders of the church didn't value their time. They were going to school, they were getting ready to take this giant test, and it just felt like they felt marginalized. And it's like, you can't, do that. So that gets us, again, that third thing is understanding. Sometimes we don't want to understand the people that we're not like. I mean, it's a lot easier to judge them. So I guess that gets us to the other bitter pill, judgment. Can I ask you an honest question? And I don't want you to answer in here. When was the last time you judged somebody? And when was the time before that? And when was the time before that? Because if I'm honest, most of it has been in the past 24 hours, and if not, all three in the past 48 hours. I obviously haven't learned very much. But the quality of the questions we ask ourselves and how we respond to God about it, because, it's really, it's really hard. All right. Number 5 on the list. I'm going to need to go to 6 because number 5 isn't going to do it. Number 5 is going to be emotions. There was a period of time after my divorce that I chose to actually God. I'm a learner, so it's part of how God wired me. That which I don't understand, for the most part, I'm desperate to learn and understand, not such that I can take credit and go, what I've learned. I just am hungry to learn. I'm hungry to be better. And so in that season, I chose to just kind of go, you know what? I don't want to be that person. I want to be a much better person. I want to find the areas in my life. And this was long before I got saved, but that version of that in our walk, honestly, I don't do a very good job of. But, okay. Yep, that'll get added to the list. Busyness. But I am mindful of the fact that I am kind of walking myself through a journey out of the land of unforgiveness. And so I've actually, because for me, that is the giant, it's like the red with the bull. No, not Red Bull. It's that place, anybody that's in recovery, it's that quicksand, slippery slope, the place you don't want to be, right? So the point being is that as we really kind of think about, in a moment we're going to talk about our thoughts, but as we think about our emotions, I think if most of us are really honest, our emotions are a double-edged sword. I guess a point and two edges. Most of the time, it's the Holy Spirit and my emotions that allow me to walk into a room and have a read for it and kind of go, okay, it's a part of my emotional intuition allows me to read other people's emotions and body language and whatnot in a way that has served me really well as a leader. It allows me to just kind of go, it's the Holy Spirit. But so when we get clogged in our emotional pathway with lack of forgiveness and resentment and judgment, because judgment's a feeling. I don't like that person. They're this, they're that, they're this, they're that. That's a very strong feeling, right? So we got to be really mindful. That stuff will just flip and poison us. And it also, what it does is it clouds our awareness of kind of going, oh, something's going on with this person. I need to spend some time with them. And, that's what leadership to me is about, is knowing your people well enough and that means that if you're stuck in your own emotions, you're just, and, part of that's a journey. I'm not saying to judge people who aren't there, but what do we do? We fast and we pray. And we put it in God's hands, and then there's some of this heavy lifting we were never designed to do. We were designed to pray. So praying, I'm going to make a guitar analogy. Gosh darn it! I'll be back in just 1 second. You guys are going to hopefully like this or think I'm a total idiot, but I'm going to give the most perfect guitar analogy for what I'm talking about. Okay. So the deal is that when I'm actually using the whammy bar, I'm actually using a lever. If you try and go down here and pull on this bar like this, or on the tremolo, versus this is the power of prayer. It's the leverage that God wants us to use that's at our fingertips, waiting for us to just kind of go, God. And sometimes God doesn't want what we want. He's just kind of like, this just needs to play out. And sometimes, how do I say it? Bad leadership just needs to get bad enough to the point where the whole cesspool kind of gets cleared out. And the sad part is that, there is, one of my saddest things about the church is I hate looking at the revolving door in church leadership. That, I think, first of all, it breaks my heart, and my guess, and I'm not God, so I don't know, but my guess is it breaks God's heart. And yes, there's times when people are sent out. That's a different thing. But we were called to be planted. We were called, like Jem, through the generations. If you look at Hillsong, one of the legacies is that Hillsong united. And I've had the privilege of sitting at a rehearsal, pre-rehearsal meeting that Nigel was leading when he was but a wee lad, and watching how he led that team, the conversation, what the life he spoke over that team before they broke out into their rehearsals and their basically their sectionals and all the things that happen on this rehearsal night. And I actually got a chance to watch what happens behind the scenes and the pouring into. And I also know my buddy Ian that was provided the Pastoral Care for generation one of that team, and for the Michael Guy Chislets, and for the Droffs, that was just pouring into Ian and Lucy Fisher. But Ian was really, and the amazing thing is that you can usually point back to one person and go, that person went above and beyond. Ian Fisher, original bass player, on a bunch of the early Hillsongs. I mean, just an amazing musician, but an amazing pastoral care person that honestly, the impact that he had on me, I would never be the same person if it hadn't been for Fish and the time he spent pouring into me very missionally. Wasn't an accident, and I just am grateful to God that I had Fish. But those Hillsong folks, it's like, we see sometimes the extent of the ministry. I had a chance to just kind of see, the roots of the tree, and it was powerful. 3 generations deep. And now basically 4, right, with Young and Free, because there was it's just like, look around us, and where else do we see that kind of legacy? So and yeah, Jam, it is very hard to see that. My brother-in-law's marriage broke down because he really was a pretty nasty piece of work. After his wife kicked him out, she went to church one day, and a couple saw her sit down, and they got up. Oh. Nothing to say. Our thoughts. What kind of silliness are people thinking when they don't provide comfort for people that are broken? And so this is my gentle challenge to you. I encourage you to write down 5 things that are recurring enough thoughts that are not life-giving, Christ-like, fruit-bearing, and I'm not talking about toxic fruit. They aren't aren't helping the Holy Spirit reside in your vessel. Write down 5 things, and just put it someplace, whether it's in a journal. If it's private enough that you don't want somebody else to see it, I totally get that. But be mindful of those 5 things, and be equally mindful of when you're thinking those things. And kind of then, when you do, think of what are 2 other thoughts that I could think in their place. Because we not only want to give ourselves, well, this is the other behavior, but let's think about 2 other choices that we've got. Because sometimes that little bit of leverage, well, I can go here, or I can go there. And sometimes, I know I shouldn't do this. And sometimes it's kind of like losing, the COVID-20 or whatever the heck it is. The first choice on what I'm going to do isn't always appealing in reality, right? So sometimes having a second choice, like, okay, it just gives us another option that sometimes is going to be attractive enough to get us there. The other thing, last on the list there, is busyness. It is a real danger, because what happens is we miss that person. We come in, we've been on our phone, we're on the phone, we're doing this, we're rushing around that, and it's with the times, we are just digitally distracted from the very things that we're supposed to be going, wait a second, this thing has grabbed enough of my focus. Like, basically, if your focus fox is here, as opposed to part of leading people and part of being a great follower is just being attuned to what's going on. Because when, as a follower, we're like, man, this isn't right, take it there. Because one is when our mind goes here, generally our heart's going to follow. Because God talks to the whole thing, right? God's just like, yeah, you're right. It's not fair. And it may not change. And usually God just kind of sits you down. It's like, so if that is the case, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to grow in spite of the situation? What are the wise decisions you're going to make? Even when, you want to react in the flesh, what are the better decisions that you're going to make rather than losing your patience? Patience is it deserves to be on the list as well, right? Okay. I don't have kids. I've got kind of the extension of that with some of the folks that I've gotten to know. Brad, I cannot put into words the depth of my emotion around the lack of sensitivity in leadership to the fact that, like, that's somebody's kid. Forget that that's that person there, but, like, that's that person's kid. Like, there are layers to this thing. I'm not saying that just because it's somebody's kid, because we're all somebody's kid, but it's a little bit different than when you watch somebody underserve your kids in ministry. It's really hard to watch, and to watch them bolt. I can't even put into words. The thing is, yes, it is. But unfortunately, it's part of the church experience sometimes, right? And I am too, except for the fact that I am grateful for the fact that Jem is just like, well, I'm still going to be present there, and God's called me to do this, so, like, I'm just showing up, right? A guitar buddy of mine, I won't mention his name, was giving me some advice, and sometimes he's a little kind of under the radar with it. He just said, well, sometimes it's just about showing up. And, there was a lot of good subtext to it, but you know what? The showing up part of it is a big deal. I almost moved church, but after hanging out with some of the youth kids one night, my world and perspective changed to investing into others. There it is. And here's the thing is like, that is the transformation where, when we actually care to, again, understand, we take a look what's around us. And here's the thing is when we are focused here versus going, I need to understand the depth of this, the decisions we make are dramatically impacted because it stops being about our feelings and our emotions, and it starts being about the benefit of other people, which is what this thing has always been about, right? We were kind of called to have, the equivalent of our own 12 or something like that, so we can actually take all the things that have been poured into us and pour those into others, and unfortunately some church leaders and, at various different levels, and especially hard to watch it. This sad irony is that most senior pastors were youth leaders, youth pastors at one point, and unfortunately they make their mistakes with somebody else's kids. It's one of the reasons you need to be especially judicious in raising up and lording over youth pastors, not overseeing them, oversighting them, and just making sure that they don't make colossal mistakes that cause that type of division inside a family. Because unfortunately, when kids fall away from church, they usually fall away into other stuff. And that other stuff isn't good. And I think some of the youth pastors are oblivious enough to the implications of their lack of follow through and understanding with people they're called to lead, that they, and they're young, and I get it, but they're going to answer for it. Unfortunately, the damage can be deep. And you know what? Grace is hard, and that includes extending it to our leaders. But again, this is the thing, is when we want to judge our leaders, we just take it up there and we just pray about it. It's like, look, I'm really, again, my comment is like, how many times have you judged in the past 24 or 48 hours? I'm like, I'm not going to walk through it here, but I could easily walk through it, But, the whole point is that, as opposed to like judging that leader, it's just like, Lord, I'm really, really wanting to go down a road here that's not good for me. And it's not good for my walk. How do I extend grace towards the situation? It's not good for my kids or whatever it is. And, boom, boom, boom. You need to fast? I'll fast. You need me to pray? I'll pray. Here's the thing, is that this is one of the things that our emotions don't inform us on. Emotions aren't very smart, right? They're part of how we navigate some of what we do, but at the same time, they're not very smart. So the idea is there are times like, all right, Lord, my emotions aren't serving me very well. So let's actually have a conversation that the emotions aren't invited to for a minute. What do I need to do? Just give me some direction. Let me know what I need to do. And God will always show up. And sometimes he shows up, but he doesn't weigh in yet. And sometimes he's just kind of like, that's his way of saying like, I'm asking you to wait and be patient, silly. And here's the thing is that, we want God to be an ATM. We go up, put in our card, and we get our dividends and we walk away. It doesn't work like that. In fact, it's the opposite. We put in the dividends and God just kind of goes, well done, good and faithful servant. He doesn't always give us the answer right away. As I recall, this was the same God. It's like, all right, grab some kindling, take that boy of yours up on the hillside. Like, it's not an always immediate sort of thing. Where he's getting us to, sometimes it involves our going on an obedience walk where we're just like, this doesn't feel or look like anything like I signed up for. What? He's like, okay. What? Okay. And, sometimes that he has to have us walk to a place where we haven't heard it yet, with the faith that when we get there, that word that we're walking for is going to be there. And, that it's really good for us, right? It's kind of like expecting to go to the gym one time and all of a sudden you got all that rip and definition. Like, where is the perseverance in that? God is preparing us for, not just a race, but for the journey of a lifetime. And that journey of a lifetime, in theory, means looking around kind of going, who do I see that I help come a little bit further along on their journey? Can I look around me and immediately go, that person, that person, that person, that person, that person, that person, that person? Like, can I take an inventory and kind of go, can I see what God poured into me being poured into others? And can I see that beginning to manifest itself as they're pouring into others? Because that's ultimately the tell, right? Like when the fertile soil passes on fertile fruit into fertile ground, it produces more fertile fruit, right? And you can see it, and you kind of go, and somebody will say to you, well, I'm just doing what you showed me to do. And you're like, yes. Like, that is the ultimate, because you can do nothing to force that tell, but when it comes, it's just like, and I got to tell you, it's a feeling that you just kind of go, and that's the long, woohoo, walking along here, I'm not getting the answer, walking some more anytime. That's a series of walks without answers that get us there. So powerful. Here we go. Come on. This is how people will know you are my disciples, but by your love for one another. If you just do nice things for those who, and I'm not great at reciting the word, unfortunately, for those who can do nice things back to you, what reward will you receive? Tell me about it. Oh, look at this. Ouch, this hurts. I'm so guilty. I'm always checking stats for my podcast. I'm always in some kind of theological whatever on Twitter, and I get tuned out to the real people around me. So, here's the thing is it's like sometimes God gives us a word and a message and a platform that is important to us. And sometimes there's just a moment somebody else's mouth open goes, miss that piece. But the best part is when in humility we can go, ooh, that sounds a bit too much like me, right? The whole forgiveness thing, anytime somebody talks about forgiveness, I'm like, that's me all over. But I've really made a decision that I'm just like, in spite of my feelings, I'm not going to be that. So you know what? The decision is just kind of like, it's a good hurt, right? It's just kind of like, it's just part of the things. It's like, my analogy for you, my friend. I love the tall trees. Tall trees also get wider. I'm not saying I'm a tall tree yet, but the point being is that, and one of the things that happens, they get rings from the different seasons, right? Those seasons don't just come with a spring and a summer and a fall. They come with a winter. And so, you with me? So the point being is that it just happens like that. And so part of what has to happen is sometimes it's not until we get the next ring that we look back at the season or the season before and go, oh, I missed that. The best part is seeing it, though. And you kind of go, all right. And here's the thing is that generally with this show, I don't really I've stopped looking at the numbers because I'm investing in something that isn't about the numbers. But I totally understand. The funny thing is I actually went to check in on last week's show, just kind of go, how many people actually did see it on Facebook? Because I was curious, but not for the reasons I used to allow myself to be curious, which I totally understand. Because we do want to believe we're impacting for the kingdom, and we do want to see the metrics because it does tell us something. But my belief is like, actually, I'm more interested in pouring into the group to whatever extent I can. So let me be clear. I'm not professing or proclaiming or wanting to be, quote unquote, your leader. This is a community group, a life group for worship guitar players, right? We talk about gear and we talk about God and we talk about stuff like this, right? So I've been put in the position where I get a chance to lead this group, but that does not make me, in my mind, your leader. So let's just be clear. But the point being is that leaders kind of go through things like, oh, I missed that, right? So the thing is, the other thing about leading this community group, I'm just like, you know what? I don't care about the numbers. I'm much more invested in the dividends because you know what? If I'm all in and I press in, God's going to do His part. And if He wants more people, He's going to do it. I don't have to worry about that. But at the same time, it was a journey of getting there, right? And I'm cool with it. That doesn't mean that we're not going to do things to try and grow this, but the metric part of it, I made a decision a couple of months ago where I'm just like, you know what? I'm much more interested in the fabric of what we do here than I'm interested in the number of people that observe it. So I feel you though. Oh, dude. So, the funny thing is that what you guys don't necessarily know is how much, I think about stuff, over the course of a week, and, I'm also thinking about like, I've never owned any of those PV Tweed amps. And I'm kind of like, I would have a hard time going to the chairwoman of the board and going, hey, Alan's, is talking about these PV Classic 30s. I've never had a Classic 30. In my mind, I'm like, I have to own a PV Classic 30 because obviously I've missed something, but I think, Alan, you were there when I talked about getting Squire shamed, right? And, some little 18 or 17-year-old punk who doesn't know any better, but I was like, there it is. And we talked about the GT shamed and, oh gosh, I'm terrible with names. Hang on, I'm going to have to jump over. By the way, I apologize, Facebook. I'm going to jump back over and say hello to everybody. Peter Davidak, my dear friend. So Brett was, I think it's Brett that was GT 100 shamed. It's just like, holy cow. So, all right. So, it's really, okay, hang on a second. I'm going to jump over to Facebook after I bring this one in. Funny story about busyness. I was on staff in youth ministry. Boom. Boom. I don't know what that was, but it was like a sticky virtual high five. I have no idea what that meant. And I engaged, there's going to be a second part here. All right. There we go. I engaged with youth on Facebook 9 years ago. Come on. I can't. There we go. Church leaders walk by my table and see me on Facebook and assume that I was slacking off. You know, oh, no, this escalated all the way up to the executive level meeting. The pastor had to defend me. Oh, man. Not much grace on the part of the folks who insisted I was slacking off. You know, add to the list empathy. Just like put yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's like, hey, you know, I'm on Facebook hanging with the crew. Jeez. All right, hang on. Let me jump over to Facebook because that part doesn't feed in automatically. So let me just give everybody over there a good quick holler. Sorry about that. Ooh, Brett. Wow, look at this. Hey, Matthew, what's going on? Brett, I can't bring this in, unfortunately. I have an entire series on forgiveness I've taught and preached. Love it. Forgiveness has had my name on it. It's coming on a decade, man. It's just a thing. Love it. So important. Yep. Louis B. Smedes, who I don't know, has some really great quotes on forgiveness. To forgive someone is to set a prisoner free only to discover the prisoner was you. Lonnie, hey, in my first divorce, I was ridiculed and chastised for time making music. Music is therapy for those of us that have the unique ability to express our emotions in the way that most people do not have a vehicle for doing that. Some folks do not understand that at all. Now I am a get healthy pastor who also serves on the worship team, basically making music and a living. Way to go. My ex told my last church that they should hire me, which led to my current role. Bottom line, it was hurtful, it was hard, but it was also forgiven from both sides. So this is an interesting thing. And I'm going to say this peripheral to your comment, which is hurt that was worth it, right? Like, I wouldn't say that I would necessarily want to go through the divorce, you know, that I went through, because it was very painful, you know. But at the same time, the outcome, I'm a much better person than I would have been if I'd stayed in that marriage. No, and it's not in any way to slight my ex-wife, right? But the outcome, and it tore me down to the studs, but the outcome was much better. And honestly, this whole church thing that I kind of described tore me down to the studs, but tore me down to the studs much deeper. And, you know, the good news is God surrounded me with some really, really quality people that kind of like, you know, one of my favorite things ever is watching, you know, like church construction crews get together and put together a wall, and they just pull up the, you know, with like 2x4s or whatever it is, and then just like the wall goes up, and just watching people. That's kind of how I felt. There were people around me just kind of going, we're going to help rebuild this thing. And God just put some really masterful people that were just pivotal at that time in my life for just kind of helping me, you know, get, because, you know, a building when it's kind of ripped away to the studs, it's out there in the elements, you know, and folks were just like, no. We're gonna help put you back together. All right, there we go, Brett. The basis of forgiveness is surrender. Tell me about it. Jesus surrendered his will in the garden before he offered himself as a sacrifice on the cross and forgave those who hung him there. It's kind of right there in front of us. But it's hard sometimes, right? You know, just because we know it's right. That's kind of where I got to, like, well, if you can find a first and second option, sometimes just kind of going, it just feels a little bit less. And sometimes, you know, if we go, okay, well, here are the two ways that are good ways that I can respond to it. Let me do the muscle up version of that. Bruce, Doug, I forgive you. You don't have to do a whole show about it. Actually, this is one of the great things about Bruce and my relationship that I love is that there are times that Bruce and I lock horns. It's not very often, and we spend a huge amount of time laughing. It's actually one of my favorite things about our relationship. And we had 2 meetings with 2 huge record companies today. And one of my favorite things is at the beginning of the meeting, one of the record company executives just said, I love meeting with you guys. It always feels so good. And it is a unique gift that Bruce and I have, which was we live in a place of joy. We live in a place of gratitude. We see all the things that God is doing. He opens door after door after door after door after door. And, and here's the thing is that not every season is like that. We've been through some tough seasons. Bruce, through the whole COVID season, that's been a walk of faith for which he's been incredibly honoring. And he just walked out and just said, all right, I'm not seeing the answers, but I'm walking out in faith. And I'm going to keep blessing my guys, and just like, and, he just continues. I saw a little thumbs up. I'm going to presume that was Bruce. And even if it wasn't, the thing is that NAMM reached out to Bruce and they actually, I think it's going to be in the Summer NAMM magazine, but they're actually it's a photo of Bruce and just kind of talking about his experience with NAMM and whatnot. And when an organization as important to the music industry as NAMM basically goes, we want you to be one of our poster boys, it's just kind of like, and, the funny thing is I didn't even think of why did they pick me? I was just like, I'm so glad they picked Bruce, right? Now, there's no reason to pick me, but normally if you're working with somebody, all the same people, part of you goes, why did they pick me? I wasn't like, I'm so glad they picked Bruce because of all the people in the industry and out of all the other brands and all the people who really deserve it. He's been such a proponent of NAMM, a partner to NAMM. And, it's just I felt so honored on his behalf that they chose to honor him with that. And it spoke to the man of God who he is and the influence that he's had without any of the pomp and the stuffy shirt or any of that. He'd much rather be riding after church on his Harley. We're a rock and roll bunch here. I just got to warn you. So if you have a problem with Harleys and loud guitars, we may not necessarily be the right community group for you. But if you're into that, we absolutely are. And so Bruce, love you, bro. Galatians 6:1. By the way, Galatians. I remember in basically kind of like the Bible classes that we had when I first got saved. The pastor that was, I'm not going to mention any names here, but it was the husband and wife team. It was the wife, and she loved Galatians, and I love Galatians because it's such a life-giving book, and it's just kind of like, you just kind of walk away, just kind of getting a sense of what God's heart is like, right, and what Jesus's heart is like, and what our heart should reflect. So Galatians 6:1 says, we find someone in a trespass, we who are spiritual should restore them in the spirit of gentleness. Right? Little goosebumpies, right? Like that gentle spirit, when somebody is trespassed, they know they don't need to be beat up over it. He's not fired, Brett. I think you need to define what you mean by judging. That can be a misleading term. All right. So there are a couple different types of judgment. One is, I think, the one that I'm referring to is where we decide that we're going to play God and choose here and here to some extent or another cancel somebody. And this is one of the things about this whole cancel society that I'm just like, let's see how oh, look at all those thumbs. Oh, ho, 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 ho. I'm going to go as close as I can to this without going too far, but I'm going to get close, noting that I'm on Facebook, so the algorithm is already listening. Jesus never canceled anybody. Canceled death, canceled sin. But when it came to people, he never wrote them off. The hypocrisy of you can do anything you want, anything, until we choose to sit in the seat most high, and then we're going to cancel you. Banished. Now, there's some really not good stuff that people are doing in the world. But Jesus never canceled anybody. And this is the whole thing about free will, is people end up making decisions, and they're people that destroy other people's lives. But Jesus' forgiveness was unanimous to all. That's the great thing about this walk and this life of ours. It's not an exclusionary thing. It almost brings me to tears because it's for those that don't deserve it, right? I mean, it's just like the tax collectors and, the Sauls. I think about the casualties of the cancel culture of people that had huge influence and made mistakes. But think about the influence that some of those folks could have for the kingdom. And, it's just kind of like the enemy plays a smart, long hand. They know exactly what they're doing. Indeed. Amen. And, here's the thing is that, so Brett's comment, it's sad to watch religiosity destroy the culture of productivity. The church needs to get kingdom-minded. It's a battle that we fought, one of the conversations, I don't want to go too far into the fray here, but I'll go a little bit, is that, one of the conversations that I've had with Melissa, and I'm drawing her into this by name, but we talk about some of the, without mentioning by name, some of the other church bodies, if you will. I can go Judaism, chosen people. It's just like that famous quote, like, well, God's chosen people. Why doesn't He choose somebody else for once? The Jews have been through it, and the thing that amazes me is, it's like, I remember before I got saved, I was like, one day I was like, what, I'm going to go to temple, because like God was going like, Doppler. I went to temple and I was like, I'm looking for God, but I'm just not hearing that He's in the building. But I did see some traces, right? I saw the footprints. And I was like, but it was the beginning of just kind of like, what? I'm looking. And with Judaism, there is a word that I will liken to religiosity, because we have to be careful that I think religiosity means some very specific things that are congruent to my meaning for it. But there are other people that might take a different meaning to it. So I will go so far as to say tradition is a great definition of religiosity inside the Jewish mindset. And again, we're at the Seder, which is all about the irony. The Seder, the lamb's blood, the passing over. It's like, come on, people. Seriously. The parting of the sea. Just like, what part of this are you missing? And I get it. They don't necessarily think Jesus is the Messiah, but there's also, there is not the belief that it's God. The Jews are a lovely people. And, just for the sake of conversation, there's the entire Arab world that would love to see Israel wiped off the face of the earth. And then there's this little country that's the size of a pimple in the middle of a desert that after World War II, they're like, yeah, go on. We're going to take a little bit of land, different conversation, not going there, in the middle of a flippin' desert. If you've ever been to the Negev, is it the Negev? I think it's the Negev. I've been there. They got the before and the after photos. It was a desert. God's hand has been upon the Jews. They've been through some stuff. Disbelief rampant. Doesn't change the fact that God's hand has been powerfully upon them. And I'm just going to... No, it's fine, but you don't want to go to... What does that mean? I'm not going to argue with that one. So the point being is that, religiosity, it's why they didn't really want to hear that the Son of God was amongst them, right? Didn't look and dress like they did, although he knew the Old Testament inside and out. It's just like, again, if we don't dress and if we don't have the skinny jeans or whatever the heck it is, if you don't look like X, Y, and Z, then you're not in the clique. We got to be careful of that. Yeah, and that is religiosity, but it also, we want to be careful around the nuance around words like judgment and religiosity, that we're clear as to what we mean, because they draw such a strong emotion. Sometimes, and I'll say this for myself as well, we're better off finding other words that aren't so push-buttony. I'm not saying to do so. I'm saying to consider finding alternative words that sometimes, here's the thing, I'm saying this as a friend in a community group for worship guitar players, is like, you may find, like I've had so I'll go first person. He's like, earlier you saw me walk back from some, everybody does this, or everybody's like, I walk myself back, is like, people have been trying to get into my head, like, those sorts of comments, people hear the everybody, and that's the lens that they hear the whole thing. I miss the ability to kind of deliver the point. So for me, the ability to say disbelief or, whatever. So just a thought as a friend. And just in the same way, you're like, hey, this judgment thing, that may not necessarily be the best word for getting it across. So in love, and, here's the thing. This is one of the other problems that we've got as churches, is we don't actually do a great job of just kind of like, hey, let's dare I say, let's pull down the air of religiosity and let's just have a heart-to-heart talk. Tell me what you're trying to say, and I'm not going to judge you through the words that I'm going to push around and turn around on you. I want to understand what you're saying. I want to understand your heart. Let me understand where you're coming from. Like, if the world had a lot more of that going on, I think we'd be in a much better place. All right. Friedman, what's going on, my dear friend? Hello, Doug. The new Helix firmware is awesome. Yes, it is. Do you think it's okay to use the new Orange Amp model in 3.10 firmware in a worship set? Absolutely. First of all, go to Worship Tutorials. That's the thing. We're a worship guitar community group, and I am happy to Helicize. It is amazing. I'm actually working on a song. I'm a little late for the 3.1 update video, but I'm going to do it anyway. Working on a song for that, but it's a little bit higher energy. There's a short version. There was a band called Worth Dying For. Great band, signed to Integrity. I don't know if Lincoln produced them or was just buddies with them, but the guitar players played through Orange, Rocker Verbs, and SGs. Look up Worth Dying For. They are awesome. They weren't classically new metal, but they rocked. And I love that bass player played a 5-string, just like, they were kind of like United, but a little bit more rock. And the guitar sound was amazing. But go check out Worship Tutorials video on 3.1. They've got this patch that they built around the rocker verb, where there are two sounds in there that I told both Bradford and Brian. These are two of the best guitar sounds I've ever heard. One is Bradford is at Brian's playing, And Bradford just afterwards says, oh, the El Capistan was on, let me take that off. The sound just before then, the delay is engulfed in this bed of reverb that I'm like, that's not pre-delay, but the lovely wrapping around the delay. It was one of the most blissful sounds I've ever heard. I was like, I was just blown away. And then Brian switches to this number 2 position in, I believe, the PRS that he was playing. With this chorus on, I'm like, slain to the core twice in the same video. And that patch, if it's not free, it's just plain worth buying. But I was like, so they're going to the different snapshots, but I like the sounds. So yeah, so they use that amp a little differently. It's only the dirty channel of that amplifier that they used, but they've got some amazing tones. So yes, how about that for an answer? Woohoo! Okay, Friedman, the new healing. All right, yep. There we go. Good. Ooh, emotions are to be a gauge, not a guide. I'll cut and paste that. Surely so. All right, hang on a second. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. There we go. Friedman, grace is very important as Jesus Christ gave this to us, so just to be patient and live for him. This is the whole thing, is we're not very patient people. And the funny thing is as believers, in theory, one of the things, Jesus, I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, Jesus played the long game, right? He wasn't about the immediate things like, this is going to take some time. The Saul guy, I'm going to get in there. It's not going to happen right away. But Saul didn't get canceled. Jesus was like, I see the gold, right? So important. And bassist. I love you, Peter. Gear Whisperer, Shane. This is so heavy. I don't know about that. But, talking about some of the stuff that we don't get a chance to talk about. Again, community group for worship guitar players. I'm going to have to watch this a few more times. You might have to keep an eye on your inbox. Awesome. I love it. Hurt that was worth it. I love that. Tell me about it. In fact, I gotta actually put that in my little digital treasure trove there. Lonnie, down to the studs, laugh out loud. I know what that means. That is the good news is God can kind of come in, and sometimes by the time you take things down to the studs, you're able to rebuild things a lot better than they were. But that down to the studs feeling leaves you feeling very naked and feeling very exposed and feeling like everything that's been part of your construction has been ripped away. It's a makeover. Friedman, great question. Was I a Christian / were you a Christian already when you got divorced on your first wife? No, I wasn't. And my first wife and I were non-practicing Jews, and so honestly, it's without going too far down the divorce thing, because the sad reality is that Christians, and I remember hearing this figure, the divorce rate for Christians is about the same as it is for non-believers, which is sad. And sometimes, my Melissa, I can say this without going too far down the path of this, but she's talked about it at conferences. Her first marriage was an abusive marriage, and she got a divorce. So and that wasn't going to change. And finally, she got the courage up to leave, and we wouldn't have the life that we do if that marriage hadn't ended. And I know, the different folks have different takes on that, so I don't want to really weigh into that, other than the fact to say that if she'd stayed there, she'd probably be dead. That is the cutest thing ever, Joe Reggio. Bruce's joy walking. Oh, that is the cutest thing ever. I love that. Joe, by the way, in case you're not familiar with him, is a master builder, builds brilliant guitars, and is a master luthier as well. And if you're not familiar with his instruments, let me just double check the URL. Regio. Hold on a second. Regio guitars. There we go. Regio custom guitars. And by the way, he's a master. Oh, look at that. Very lovely. And he's just brilliant. And he's also a master luthier. So if you got stuff that you need fixing, he's your guy. Brett, thanks for defining that judgment. That is what I was hoping you meant and thought you meant. Wanted to clarify. And this is the thing about words, is like, they're I'm an extreme person. I've had to learn to bring my rhetoric down a little bit because people responded to the specific words or the intensity of my emotion rather than the message. And I was like, I've just got to change. Jim Giannini, what's going on, my dear friend? Hello to Nashville. Always a pleasure, my friend. Freeman, I love you too. I love you, brother. Doug Doppler, always love the stuff that you're doing. God bless you always. And the same to you, my friend. Thank you so much. God has been busy with me, let me tell you. Jim, wow, Doug, you got it. So blessed. Thank you. Ditto. He surrounds me with amazing people. Oh, here she is, Melissa Doppler, Romans 2:4. Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? I didn't mean to look at you. Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin? Yep. Shane, never been to the Negev. I've been to Iraq a few times. Spent some time in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait about 30 years ago. There are some folks that put some walk into the talk. Shane, you know you have my heart, but you always knew that. I actually found a present that I've got for you. Shane, I need your address. I found it yesterday, so I've still got it, so I got to send it to you. Yes, definitely on 3.1 with pleasure. Friedman, with great pleasure. This is it's all amazing. All right, let me head back over into the other land of chat here. All right, okay. Matthew, PV stuff is awesome. Let them judge. Laugh out loud. I love that. Yep, you play PVs and you don't have a Strymon. Heretic. Oh, my word. Tell me about it. Hey, Chris. That's a new photo. I love it. Hey, you need to clip the strings on that gem. Killing my OCD. So the funny thing about these is I learned this from Steve Vai. And one of the things about this, it's actually, who was I telling about this the other day? Brian Wall. So when I was studying with Joe Satriani, I was like 15, 16 years old. And at one point, I used to play just like a traditional Strat, and I had broken, when I started studying with Joe, I wasn't old enough to drive, and my mom didn't let me drive until I was 18. She was a wise soul. Literally wouldn't let me get my license. But I did go to school and take the driver's training class, just so you know. But so you could, if you broke a string, you could kind of run the B string over to the D string. And then if you had an extra D string, then kind of run that over there. So I come into one of the lessons and the strings have got this kind of, offset thing. And Joe looked at me and looked at the headstock and looked at me, and he kind of had one of those looks, and it was just kind of like, yeah. And I before he said anything, I said, look, the music store was closed. I couldn't get a ride. Out to Concord to go to Guitar Center. He was like, I can see that. And it was just so funny to watch him navigate because my guess is somewhere back in Satriani's mind was him having done something like that when he was 12, 13, or 14 years old, kind of going, Yeah, that looks a little familiar. So what Steve would do, though, is he would actually take the ball in and put it there. My whole thing was, back in the days before I had copious amounts of strings hanging out, I would, when you break a string on a trem like this, you can let it out and go into there. So this would actually give you all sorts of extra string. And I apologize. I do understand how that can be disturbing. But the thing is when you actually have the ball end there, if the ball end kind of gives out, this kind of, in addition to giving you some extra slack on the string, also just makes it so you're not dependent on the ball. But yes, so look at boy, this is confession. What is this? Next week's show, tithing and not buying more gear. I'm totally kidding and forgiving myself for typing this. No, I think that if we can't have fun, gas and financial stewardship hides under table. I love it. Here's the thing: is the other thing about religiosity is like holding on to things. I think one of my favorite things about Jesus was like he wasn't uptight. This is how do I say this in a hopefully non-judgmental way, right? Jesus knew how to hang. He was like he could hang with people. He valued relationship over judgment, right? Ultimately, he sat to the side of God on high, right? And does. And if anybody was in a position who could judge. But that wasn't his vibe at all. He was like, I want to get to know you for you. He was in it, all in, right? It's like, it wasn't, some uptight kind of, he just was chill and took time. He got to know his 12, right? And what, let's talk about it. It's like, let me see if I can say this in the right balance. Jesus is on the throne, but it was the 12 and the 12 and the 12 and the 12 and the 12 that ultimately were those people that kind of went, Doug, we need a bass player this Sunday. You want to make $50? I'm like, okay. It was Jesus in the background, but it was that person that was of the 12, of the 12, of the 12, that invitation came from. We are the stewards of the handshake, the hug, the acceptance, the forgiveness, the trust that God is bigger than we are, which means we know what parts of the judgment cycle to leave to God. And we know what parts of the faith cycle we need to do when we don't see God moving right away, that we're kind of like, you know what? This has a cyclical nature to it. God's going to move. I just have to have the patience to be ready to wait for it. Tech support. Yes. Corey, what's going on? Hey, I will always try to guard the relationship versus my offense. Tell me about it. Dude. We aren't whipping boys, but empathy and understanding go a long ways in forgiving. The empathy thing, holy cow, the world seems to be so far away from empathy right now. And I've been giving myself some empathy conversations lately. I grew up pretty privileged. And if I'm really honest, there's a bunch of folks who I have so little in common with that without empathy, I would never even begin to understand the plight of their situation. And out of the lack of understanding, there are times that I just kind of go, I don't get this, right? And it's because of that, I don't understand. If I'm really honest, some of the racism I feel towards me just because of the color of my skin. And part of my story, just because I'm white, and part of why I feel it so strongly, is that part of my story, as it relates to this larger conversation, is that my relatives and the Jews marched hand in hand in the early civil rights movement. More importantly for me, part of my journey, all I can do is talk about my journey. I remember being a little boy in Chicago and seeing the tattoos on the survivors that had been to, I don't remember if it was Auschwitz or whichever camps, but I remember meeting, and they're gone now, but I remember meeting those people and seeing the tattoos, and one of them explaining to me what it meant as best they could. If we don't try and have empathy for one another and try and understand the journey that the others have been, we're going to continue to want to judge one another because of the way we look, because of the differences in background. And, it's a journey, but I hate having somebody stare at me and give me a nasty look because I'm white. Just in the same way that somebody is some other color, and I don't care what other color it is, doesn't want to be judged for the color of their skin. But I do know I feel very strongly on a personal level because I know how many of my relatives perished in a flipping gas chamber, in a work field in the middle of Europe, and the rest of the world didn't flipping care. United States knew, what happened in Bosnia. It's why it incensed me on such a deep level, because I knew Europe once again was watching an ethnic, religious group, I don't care whether Muslims or Jews, being rounded up and slaughtered. And so, I'm particularly sensitive about the journey of people that have been separated from the land that was theirs, not by choice, have been on. And it's really hard for me to feel judged just because I'm white. Now, I'm saying it, I know this is streaming. I'm saying it in all honesty. I'm trying to figure that out because I have a hard time with that, knowing the journey that the people that came before me went on to get here. I hate feeling judged because of the color of my skin. And I have a hard time with that. But what I've got to do is combat that with empathy, because you know what? I don't know the journey of the person on the other side. But I just hate that feeling of just like, you don't know me. You don't know the compassion that I have for your journey. You don't know how close to your journey, my journey, and the journey of my forefathers, and those that had those tattoos. That, by the way, they would have been about this tall when those tattoos got put on their wrists and on their arms. I mean, it's just like, I don't know why that moment, and it was in these apartment buildings in Chicago, but I knew that was a moment, and I was too young. I was like 6 or 7. I knew it was a moment that was going to change something in me. I wasn't, old enough to really be cognitive of this is a life-changing moment, but something about the way those folks talked about it, I was like, this is something significant. And they wanted to make sure that it wasn't forgotten. And the mistakes.
We need to reduce plastic waste in the environment.
That's why at America's beverage companies,
our bottles are made to be remade.
Not all plastic is the same.
Unexpected.
We're carefully designing our bottles to be 100% recyclable, including the caps.
They're collected and separated from other plastics,
so they can be turned back into material that we use to make new bottles.
And not know my journey.
That completes the circle and reduces plastic waste.
Please help us get every bottle back.
It's got to be bigger than my choosing to feel offended by the fact that you don't know my journey, but you're judging me. That's the same.
At Arizona State University, we never stop asking, What's next?
With the enemy spouting
Next
forward.
is moving your education
again,
forward,
this is a community
digitally,
group of
in person,
partners.
or even
Which we don't have
right
a TV
now. Next is experiencing a virtual classroom.
My hands start sweating.
And the reality
Next
is,
is
finding
you know
new
what?
ways to
If
stay
you don't
connected,
like me, you don't like to tell
even
me my
I was
story.
nervous.
That's
I was
all.
nervous
Next is
because I didn't
pursuing the work
If
you
I don't
love
have
sitting in
to
front of
do
the
and
TV and I
know
didn't
you're
believe
making
in
a
even,
difference
and I
today.
don't
even
have
when the
With
verdict
ASU
came down,
Innovation,
the
it's time to
empathy
look
for
charges
those,
to what's next.
not because
that
they
we
color
wanted
skin, but because they
was
hate
mad.
me because I'm white.
I still was staring at the TV, listening to the judge because I was
And they
I was
don't
thinking
know
there was
my
an
journey.
outcoming
What I choose to do with
because
that
we've never
is
seen
a
this,
choice.
you know. And if
And
it was any
I
win
have
today,
to
me it was a win for
conscious of the
accountability.
fact that
That's the only
the way
win
I
today
choose
was a
to
win
live
for
that out and
accountability.
walk that out is going to
Tonight
affect
on the NBA on
lots of things
TNT,
about
former NBA star
what God is
Dwayne
going
Wade
to
describing
open
his
for me and
reaction
close
as
for
the
me.
guilty verdict in the
And
Derek
so,
Chauvin murder trial
that
was read.
journey
Finally, justice for George Floyd, for his family,
is
and
not
for
an easy
everyone
one.
who loved him. But where does
but
America
at
go
the same
from
time,
here?
maybe
That's
it's
the
good
question.
for me to actually,
Let's discuss
you
now.
know,
Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.,
to
who is now,
understand
she's the
what it's like to
CEO of
feel
the
hatred
King
just
Center.
because of the way that
Thank
I
you
look,
for joining us. I
Because
really
that opens my
appreciate
eyes
it,
just
and
kinda
it's good to
going,
see
okay,
you.
I can get
Good
this.
to see you. Thank you.
You know,
You heard what Dwayne Wade said. Listen,
and you know, maybe that's
the
what it
first thing I
takes
said
for me to
earlier
for
on
my
TV when I heard that there was
privileged
a
white
verdict,
background to
I
actually
was
kinda go,
anxious.
right.
There was angst.
Yes.
People were
I
concerned.
don't understand.
You say it's a turning
But I
point
want
now
to.
that it has been read.
Right?
Why
You know,
is that,
and
Bernice?
that empathy means
You
that
know,
I'm going to have the
before I
lens
say
to,
that,
even
Don,
if somebody
I just
doesn't
want
like me because of the way I look,
to just pause
that's not
for a
on me.
moment for the family of George Floyd. This is an important moment for them, and especially Gianna.
I know what's going on.
She's
Hang
a
on. All
powerful
right, hang on.
young
I've got to
girl.
find this other thing that's
She
playing. Thanks,
spoke
love. Hang on a second.
this
So
moment
what
into
you saw me hit a
existence.
mouse, and there we go. I can see where it is. Hang on a
her
second.
because I was 5 when
Oh,
my father was assassinated, but
there we go. There we go. Sorry about that. You saw me hit the mouse there, and then I silenced this thing, but didn't realize that was going to not do anything in terms of muting this thing. All right. Corey, it took me years to learn, and I still struggle because just like those who hurt, I'm in the process. Yep. Yes, the guys at Worship Tutorials get a lot of love on this channel. Let me jump out of the Guitarville, and I want to see if anybody, he's fixing it. Thank you. All right. Yep. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Yep. Sorry about that. Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay, hang on a second. That's funny. Captain Scarlet, that I know who that is. Hang on. So there we go. Over there. Okay. There we go. Melissa, there we go. All right, good. Yeah, there we go. Melissa on Facebook. The word doesn't mention empathy, but it talks a lot about compassion. Holy Spirit can move us to compassion when we let him. You know, this is the thing is like, you know, the natural instinct, you know, and I need to explain a little bit more about who I am and where I come from so you understand that. I grew up in a relatively affluent community. I went to a high school in 9th grade. I got in with the wrong crowd, doing all sorts of wrong things. And 11th and 12th grade, I went to Berkeley High School. It's this incredibly diverse place where Berkeley is kind of the epicenter of, you know, kind of like, hey, can't we all get along? So although there were some instances where, you know, there was tension, generally speaking, it was a place where, you know, you gave somebody a nod and it was cool, right? You know, we understood that we were different, but there was this basic understanding. It's like, it's cool. I don't have to know you to know that it's cool. It's good. And when I watch the shift of seeing some of the looks that I get, when I'm like, you don't know where I come from. You don't know what that meant to me growing up of the like, it's cool, right? There was a gang that kind of terrorized my friends. And I remember, and I'm sure this guy's probably not alive anymore, but I remember seeing him a year or two after high school, and it was like, hey. It was like, hey. There was an understanding that in spite of our differences, things were cool. And it hurt me And it continues to hurt me when I get a nasty look because of the way I look, because of the color of my skin, where I'm just like, hey, I have done everything that I can in my life to be sensitive to the fact that I know there are differences and to celebrate the diversity thereof. And it's hard, but at the same time, my choice of what to do about it is that I chose to kind of like, instead of just kind of going, wow, this makes me feel really bad, I just actually have to choose to go, I empathize, and I don't know what your journey's like, just in the same way you don't know what mine is like. I'm not going to let the enemy get in there and do that. So kind of, I would encourage anybody that's watching this to just kind of go, where is the enemy really trying to get in and create that division? Because here's the thing, is like the enemy has just got a hold of this country right now. And, Jesus was here for all of us. And he was in for the long game. And I think we've just got to be praying. We got to be down on our knees. We need to be fasting. And we need to defeat the enemy, because, the thing is that the enemy is the devil. And the enemy doesn't care about the color of your skin. He doesn't care about the color of my skin. He cares how he can turn us against one another. And through our lack of understanding, a lack of empathy, and lack of real grace, let our human emotions get so bent out of shape that we lose sight of the fact that Jesus was about reconciliation. He was about grace. He was about mercy. He was about patience. He was about love. Love your neighbor. We seem to have let the enemy get our ear twisted enough that we've lost the plot, And again, I've been franker here than I've been in a lot of places. But at the same time, if we don't have an honest conversation, then we can't actually have an honest conversation. So let me see if... there you go. 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23, pretty much the definition of empathy, isn't it? Putting ourselves in other people's shoes, right? It's hard to do, it is hard to do. It seemed like the time was ironic. Sorry about that, Brad. Yep, Captain Scarlet. It's like love. You can't extend forgiveness you don't have. It's a funny thing. It's just like, I really, and, here's the thing. God really I think he just kind of impressed on my heart. It's like, you're letting it be about your emotions. Where is your empathy? Where is it? You don't know what it's like. Just in the same way other people don't know what it's like for whatever it is that my great-grandparents and the people that didn't make it out of the camps, what they went through. Millions of people just gone, so it hasn't been like I just kind of ended up here like just some, there you go, Doppler, here's a guitar. But at the same time, if I let it be about my journey and that blinds me to empathy around somebody else's, I've missed the plot, and I can't do that. It's like love. Yep. What was I saying about judgment? That's funny. I love it. P.S. Nice orange. Thank you. The 80-30 is lovely. We can talk about guitars. I got heavy there, but let's go there. When is 3.9? We are patient people. When is 3.2 coming out? Lost the clip those strings with the Gear Whisperer. You got it. Oh, come on, Corey. So, Corey, I will take that bait gleefully. My favorite combo experience in Eventide H9, I think it's called Shimmer. An AC30 combo and an AD30 combo in stereo with Shimmer. It was like the heavens opened and the shimmer shimmered on down. The 80-30 combo is and it's different. There's an open back 212 over there. It is different than they had in the cabinet. It's very different than they had in the 412. My man, I feel you. I feel you. And they are. So, okay. So, the funny thing is that where they really get the most love from me is on Saturday morning. There is pretty much, and it almost becomes like I now can't help myself, and I almost do it a little bit on purpose, but not. Because invariably on my mainstream show every Saturday, I talk about something about worship tutorials because they're just so darn good. And they do get an awful lot of love. But the funny thing is that, if I were to open up my phone here, besides having Miss Melissa's text, and I go to my texts here, this is kind of funny. Me texting myself a photo for the postage stamp image for the show. My ex-wife, who's helping with my 80. I don't know how old my mom is. We're a little unclear. We think she's 90. Then a student. Then it's Brian and Bradford, Bruce Adolph, Brian Wall, Triad Orbit, Mission Engineering. Alex used to be my guy at Orange. Bradford Mitchell. It's just kind of like we are very much in each other's lives, and I absolutely love that. And that's the thing is like I just wish, we could find greater. And that's one of the things that I love about what's starting to happen, where churches are really actively just going, we need to be bringing people together. It's this month on the cover of Worship Musician, we got Maverick City Music, and they just did a thing with Elevation Worship. I think Pastor Furtick has done a great job of really bringing people together and just kind of going, hey, it's cool when we're on our own, but it's way better and it's magnified. And more importantly, we're magnifying God when we come together. And I have to really just like give high praise to Pastor Stephen because he's really been, in the midst of all the craziness that's going on in this country of people just being at each other's throat. He's, I think, really had a revelation about like, no. Instead of being at each other's throat, let's be at each other's backs, right? And that's the thing is if there's kind of one practical takeaway of who Jesus is in our lives, he's got our back. Like, the experiences that I had, kind of were the impetus for tonight's stream is that, feeling people that I thought had my back didn't. That is what rips you down to the studs. It's Jesus that puts us back together again better than we were before. And hopefully in so doing, surrounds us with more and more people that have got our backs. And, the thing is that we as a country have got to learn how to have each other's back, or else the enemy is just going to have just a field day. And it means that we got to have empathy. We got to have understanding. We have to be willing to take the hatred we feel thrown at us, regardless of our color, regardless of what it is, and just kind of go, you know what? That's not God that works in that paradigm. That's the enemy. That's Satan. Let's give him a name. Let's call him by who he actually is and just go, with my students, I often talk about, if you want to talk about diatonic theory and harmony, we got to give things a handle so we can pick them up and look at them. So if this were Satan and we looked in there, there's a hot steaming mess of pitting man against man. The antithesis of what the word calls for, where we're supposed to be embodying the love that Jesus extended to us and being the hands and feet of Jesus. We're not doing a great job of it culturally in America. We're not praying hard enough for unity. And nobody is really, 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 and mind you, without gently going too far over the abyss here, it's way more popular to broadcast stories of division. There are people that are praying for unity, but we're not hearing much about it, which means we need to be doing more about it. We need to be praying that the voices of unity and the voices of forgiveness and the voices of overcoming and the voices that would allow us to build bridges where bridges have been burned in communities that feel isolated and hopeless, that we're instead providing hope to the hopeless, right? That's just, because when you live in a world that's hopeless, that was really my big revelation when I really just kind of got over myself. I was just like, you know what? If I grew up in a situation of just total hopelessness, what would my life look like? It wouldn't look like what I do. And I was just kind of went, okay. And that was just the first layer of the onion skin, as I kind of began to peel it back and just like, I get this. I don't know. And I'm not going to know on this side of heaven. And I need to change some things about my own attitudes that will allow me to have greater empathy for people, whether they hate me because of the color of my skin. That's not my problem. My problem is what I choose to do about it. My problem is what I choose to pray about, to kind of go, whatever it is that happened in that person's world that makes them hate me because of the color of my skin, I want to pray against that. And in doing that, I think there's something's going to shift. So instead of us being at each other's throats and just kind of going, hey, you know what? You don't like me? Well, I don't like you either. As opposed to like, actually, I love you. And whether you know it or not, I'm praying for you. That shifts atmospheres. And it's going to change what happens in this country. And we need to get off the course that we're on, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. All right, Alan, I hope you have a great night. I love you dearly, my friend. We're at the 2-hour mark. People have dinner and so on and so forth. Much love, my brother. Thank you for all you bring. I love you. Amen. Hey, Henry, what's going on, my friend? Yep. And yes, Maverick City is blowing up, and it's so cool. They are so not pretentious, and they're just kind of like, hey, it's really, really awesome. And, it's really cool. All right, let me just pop in on Facebook here real quick. My wife had her second COVID shot yesterday, and I need to turn into a husband here for a sec, or in a sec. Here we go. Let's hop in over here. First of all, thank you everybody for just, being part of this community group, the Worship Guitar Player community group. I just love you guys and gals so much. It's such a privilege to serve here. There we go. Brett. Oh, see more. I love it. Here's what we need. John 20:22 through 23. He breathed on the disciples and told them, receive the Holy Spirit. Peter then gave us profound authority. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained. Are we willing to be an intercessor of forgiveness? Wow. Slayed me right to the core with that one. I am copying and pasting that. That's really good. Really good. Peter, much love. All right, folks, let's bring it in. Lord, we just give thanks for the privilege of knowing you, knowing your character, knowing your heart, knowing the love and the forgiveness that you've extended for us, Lord. I pray that we foster and magnify that love and forgiveness into the world around us, Lord. I pray that we beat back Satan and the drum that he's beating with lies and deceit and hatred, Lord. We beat that back with love. We beat that back with prayer. We beat it back with fasting. And we beat it back with the declaration that death has already been defeated. Satan has already lost. So he might be having a moment, but he does not reign victorious, nor will he. So, Lord, we declare in the name of Jesus that the victory for the heart and mind of this country will be ours. It is not a lost cause. It is not a lost battle. Just because of the things we see around us does not mean that the spirit of love and unity will not come back to this country, that we will not see America unified, that we will not have leaders that do not fear speaking the word of God over the land. They do not fear being judged because they believe. They do not fear being able to strike down the powers and principalities that are reigning in this country. They do not fear anything but you, Lord. And out of that love and reverence and the fear of not fulfilling the obligation that you place on each of us to be love givers and peacekeepers, Lord, that fear will keep us focused on you and being the hands and the feet of forgiveness and love and justice and freedom and peace, understanding, empathy, patience. Hands and feet, Lord, hands and feet. We ask all these things in your mighty name, Jesus. We all said, amen. Right, folks, thank you so much. I wish you a great time with whoever it is that you're going to spend the rest of your evening with. And if you by chance you're alone, I encourage you to open the Word and find companionship there. You know, God is ever present, and I'm believing that there will be a word waiting for you that is exactly the meal that you're needing to feast on. I just want to thank each of you for being part of this community. I want to thank you for your hands and feet for being part of His church. Sometimes we're in thankless roles, and it's just important that we keep our eyes on those long journeys that sometimes we don't get the answer, and sometimes not having the answer and building that patience muscle. Sometimes that's what He needs from us. So I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you're on that patience mission, praying for you, believing in you, and just, knowing that that's part of the process. And, the great thing about those journeys is that's where the real endurance muscle comes. And that endurance is sometimes what it takes for us to really see this thing through. So I just pray for each of you. Forrest, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Melissa, thank you. Much love to you. All appreciate that. Oh, Corey. It kind of breaks my heart. But at the same time, I am humbled and thrilled that we can come together and serve one another. Lord, I just pray over Corey. Lord, I just pray that getting the word glue. I don't know why. So Corey, Lord, whatever glue would be, affirmation and confirmation, that would mean what it needs to mean to Corey, Lord. Corey, we just extend our hands and our faith over you, Lord. Please give Corey the sustenance for the journey that he's on through this season. Lord, give him the nourishment in the word such that he can feel sustained in this season. And Lord, let him find joy and encouragement in things that may not be joyful and encouraging. Lord, I just pray that if it's a dry season, Lord, I just pray that you affirm him that it's always a season. After the season of drought, there's fall, there's winter, and there's spring. Lord, we lift Corey up to you. We just pray that you nourish his spirit and just lift him up in whatever ways that you know how to do. We pray all of this in Jesus' mighty name. Corey, man, my heart goes out to you. You know, and I appreciate, you know, you're just having the transparency to just kind of be real. You know, I don't know what area of finance you're in right now, but I will tell you that, you know, Melissa and I are in the San Francisco Bay Area, and every time we go out for a drive and I see the buildings that are out there in residential, in commercial real estate, I'm just like, what are these folks doing? And my heart breaks because I'm just like, these are families, these are fathers, these are families that, and I realize there are lots of people suffering, but like it is, you know, it's tough. And so, you know, with great pleasure, Brad. Corey, dude, love you. And I'm Doug Doppler at Gmail. If you find that, you know, you kind of need to get a hold of me. Actually, no, with this group, I'm Doug Doppler. I'm Doug at Adolph Agency. I don't need to do that in this group. Doug at ADOLPHAGENCY. That's my direct line. The other one on my other show, I use that just to kind of create a little bit of a buffer. I don't need to do that here. But Corey, man, if you find that you just, you know, looking at, you know, you're not waving the pathetic flag. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're like, you know what, I just need somebody to talk to, just reach out, shoot me an email, and we'll find a time. We'll hop on the phone. You know, because, you know, it's just, there's nothing worse than feeling at times that you're kind of out on the seas in a barren season, and there's not somebody that you can just pick up the phone, just kind of like, I need to talk. When can we talk? So, and I'm not saying that that's you, but I'm saying if it is, I'm here. So, and that goes for all of you. So, but you probably knew that, you know. All right, much love. Just wishing you peace in your lives, and I just pray that God moves powerfully in each of your lives this week, in ways that are meaningful, and ways that are abundant, and ways that are inspirational. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Love each of you. Thanks so much. Have a great night. God bless.